A friend of mine asked me to help him out with something. He had this fancy chime doorbell in his house, and it was fine except that if he was in the basement or out on the back porch, he couldn't hear if there was someone at the door, and he wanted to know if there was something we could do. We kicked around a few ideas, and the best idea we came up with was to add a wireless doorbell system tied into this. At Walmart, we got a wireless doorbell system. You plug this into a wall socket, and this is a wireless transmitter. You just stick this outside the front door, and when you push the button, it sends a signal by radio to this receiver that you just plug into a household receptacle. And I'm just going to plug it into the power strip here. And when you press the transmitter, it sounds off. Now, of course, we can just stick this outside the front door next to the existing doorbell and put up a sign that says, "Please press both buttons," but that would be a little bit ghetto. So the challenge was to interface this with this. Now this operates on a 3-volt lithium battery, while this operates on 16 volts AC supplied by a transformer that's usually located in the basement, the garage, or over by the breaker panel. So we need some way to connect these together, but they need to be isolated. And the solution is to use a relay. And what I did was I used a small, just a miniature relay, and what I'm going to do is wire the relay so that when they press the button at the front door, it operates this relay, and then this relay will use a set of contacts to trigger this chime, and then a separate set of contacts to trigger this transmitter, which we will locate with the chime in the house. And then that will set off this remote receiver. The relay that I used is a 12-volt DC relay, so I had to do a little trickery here. I used a diode and a capacitor to convert the AC into DC, and starting with 16 volts AC, which is what was supplied for the chime, you rectify and filter that, and you're going to end up with a little over 20 volts AC, which would have been adequate to operate a 24-volt DC relay, which I did not have handy. I had a 12-volt relay, so then I added a resistor here to knock the voltage down to 12 volts. And I used a double pole relay so that I have 2 separate closures, which I brought out as a pair of white wires and a pair of blue wires, and I'll use the blue wires to trigger the chime and the white wires to trigger the transmitter. Before he brought me the chime, he'd taken a picture of it, and there were 2 sets of red-white wires going to the chime, and on the terminal strip, and I'll zoom in here, they were only connecting to 3 of the terminals on this. Try to get it to the picture here. Terminals A, B, and C. A, B, and then a terminal marked front. A and B are power, and that's coming from the transformer on this pair of wires. And then the front, and then terminal A, which is apparently a common, and that's where the wires to the button were connected. And I didn't have a button handy, so I'm just touching the wires together to simulate the doorbell button. And then these wires I have running off to a transformer to power the unit. And it won't operate lying down. The solenoids in here aren't very strong. This is an interesting unit. It can also be operated off of a pair of 9-volt batteries. So I'll touch the wires together. And you can hear it sounds the chimes. It's not very loud, and that's why he's not able to hear it in the basement or out on the back porch. So what I plan to do is remove this wire from the front terminal, and then I'm going to wire from here to terminal B, and I'll have power whenever they press the button to operate the relay, and then I'll use the contacts to trigger from terminal A to the front, and then the other set of relay contacts to trigger this transmitter. All pretty easy, and at the end of the video I'll be showing the wiring diagram that I used for this. So let's wire this up. First thing I need to do is modify this and wire the relay contacts across the push button inside this. If you take this apart, you snap the cover off, and what you'll find in here is there's a little circuit board in here. It's got the removable battery here. You can replace this. Of course, it would last many years in normal use. The push button that triggers the chime. Then there's another programming button here. And you take out a couple of screws and the circuit board comes off. And then what we're going to find is the terminals on the back here for the switch. This actually has 4 legs off the switch, and you'll see that 2 of them, the foil path is actually common between them, so we need to go from one of those to another one. And if you're very careful, you can take like the needle nose pliers or just some metal object and short between 2 terminals on the switch. And I found if I short between those 2, I can trigger it. So those will be the 2 terminals that I'm going to solder my wires to. We'll start by drilling a hole through the back cover for the wires to come out. Run the wires through. Oh, I pushed the button. We'll tin the wires first, that'll make it easy to solder them. Put this back together. Okay, I've got the wires soldered to the switch and the cover snapped back on. Make sure it still works. Okay, now let's wire the relay into the unit and see if it's going to work. Take the wire off that was controlling the doorbell input to the chime. Shorten that up just a little bit. I'll be connecting that to trigger the relay now. Hook to the other side of the transformer here. It's getting a little tricky here trying to get 3 wires under the 1 screw. We'll see if we can pull this off. When we go to actually install this, might be better off to just bring 1 wire off this screw and splice all the 3 wires together. And then this wire will hook to the front door input. I haven't tested this ahead of time, so here's the smoke test. Turn the power part of the transformer back on. Stand this up so the chime can function. And here we go. And we have it. This thing isn't very loud. And there it goes. And there you go. The remote doorbell. I'm going to wrap this up in tape, tuck it down into here, and then this wireless transmitter will fit right down in there, and you should be able to get the cover back on the unit, and we're all good to go. And there's the doorbell extender. Now in the wiring diagram here you'll see that I've just used a diode and capacitor to make a simple half-wave rectifier to turn the AC into DC, and then I've got a series resistor with the relay coil, because you're going to have a little over 20 volts DC. There will be quite a bit of ripple, but it doesn't really matter to operate the relay coil. The series resistor is to knock the voltage down because I used a 12 volt relay. If you were using a 24 volt DC relay, it would probably work fine just with the half-wave rectifier and a reasonably good sized filter capacitor. The relay that I used had a very low current draw. It was about 15 milliamps, and I used a 100 microfarad capacitor with a 25 volt rating. It was a double pull double throw relay. I used the normally open contacts, of course, and the two poles, one pole to operate the main chime and then the other pole to operate the transmitter. If you would happen to have an AC relay that was rated about 16 or 18 volts, that would have worked fine, but that wouldn't have been a very common relay.